And hello there, everybody. How you doing? Dave LaMont. It's Nooner with Dave LaMont. It's Friday, and I am in a secret location. Actually, not really. I'm up in Central Florida with family for the weekend. My wife and I are up here, so it's not any real big secret where we are. But this is theme park weekend for the Disney folks, and I wish them the best because I believe tomorrow's the 11th, right? And Disney World opens up again. Universal opened up a few days ago, and I got to be honest, much as I love the theme park experience, I think I'll wait. And I give the cast members at both the theme parks a heck of a lot of credit. I know they want to work, I know they need the money and all of that, but there is inherent risk. And for the people who go, good for you. Have a blast. Be safe. Have a great time. I understand the appeal these theme parks have for people, especially now when we're doing our damnedest to try to find something to do, to get away, to find, even just a simple round of golf or maybe getting to play tennis or something that is relatively safe with all of the news regarding the virus, whether it is sports news or non-sports news. It is you're looking for stuff. You're absolutely looking for stuff. And I'm with you 1,000% on this, but I am concerned. I am worried about the folks who are working, the hours they're putting in. I know every safety measure humanly possible is being taken because, let's face it, it's a financial disaster for these companies, including the good old Walt Disney Company, that if something goes wrong, it's just going to be horrifying. So I hope it doesn't. I fervently, with all my heart, hope that everything goes well. And everyone, those who go, and it'll be a limited amount of people, have a blast and can have the best possible experience. So that's how we start things off. You'll notice this is a little bit stripped down version, unlike the one I did on Tuesday, which I attempted to go electric, and I've gone back to being acoustic. In other words, no graphic, no name, different good old regular fashion Facebook Live. I felt so terrible about the crash, the ending on Tuesday, that I just didn't even put it up on my YouTube channel, which, by the way, can we get to 100 subscribers for the YouTube channel, say, by Monday? That would be a great way to check it out. I don't have 100 yet. I'd love to see that happen. And the only way to do it is to go to YouTube, find Dave LaMont, and subscribe. And as John Belushi once said in Animal House, don't cost nothing. And I was thinking about this just before I hit the go live button. Animal House, and I just thought of this analogy, and I love analogies. You undoubtedly, if you're a sports fan, you've heard about what the Ivy League is doing with their athletics. They have postponed all athletics until New Year's Day, and that means no football at all. And that means their basketball programs. And by the way, the Ivy League's a pretty good basketball school. And the Ivy League will now not be in November and December. Now, December is not a very busy month for college basketball because you have exams in the middle of the month. You right around Christmas time, there might be some tournaments that people go to, and then you might start your conference season right after, in between Christmas Day and New Year's. But it's not a heavy-duty month for college basketball. Then you get rolling with January and conference play and so forth. So maybe the Ivy League only plays the conference, and that may happen nationwide for all we know. And by the way, one other thing. I'm not at my house, so any noises that you might hear, I have no control over, all right? I am not alone. So you might hear animal noises because my dog is up here. In fact, you can't see her, but she's coming in right now. So if she starts barking, I'll do my best. But that's just how it's going to be today. So the big question, and we knew about the Ivy League a week ago. They made it official a few days ago. The big question was going to be, well, now, what's FBS going to do? What are the big fellas going to do? Are the Ivy League going to drag them into this or not? Not yet. And this is where Animal House comes in. If you've seen the movie, and why haven't you? Okay? Early in the movie, when our boys are pledging fraternities, they go to the Rush House, they go to the Omegas, and they go to the button-down fraternity with the blazers and the beanies and all of that. The bad guys, ultimately. And they are pledging. And they get sent off into the room with like 3 or 4 of the undesirables in the opinion of the Omegas. And then another guy finds them and sends them back again and tells them to help themselves to punch and cookies. I think that's how the Big Five schools and conferences look at the Ivy League. Go help yourself to Punch and Cookies. You're not us. And in every way you can imagine when it comes to football, FBS schools, the power schools, and the Ivy League are not us. The Ivy League does not even participate in the FCS playoffs, and they could, but they run a 10-game regular season, and that's it, man. There's no more Ivy League football. They don't go into the playoffs. And you know what? It's the Ivy League. The experience of an Ivy League school is about academics first, not a coexistence as it is in a lot of other schools, which I'm perfectly fine with, by the way. And again, we have experience in our family with this. And my oldest son, who is the college graduate of the family so far, got his degree in 4 years while playing basketball. So it is done. But the Ivy League mentality is thoroughly, thoroughly different. What was interesting to me is we're starting to see the FBS guys, though, they're wavering about what to do with football. And when you hear about what happened in North Carolina with 37 positive tests and Ohio State shutting down voluntary workouts, I know for a fact University of Florida is opening things up on Monday with a full team expected to report this weekend, not far from where I'm at. If I had an answer for the question that I've been asked more than any other question other than where did you get that shirt? This, by the way, is pink not a great color for me? Thanks. Are you going to play college football this year? Are we going to see it? And every week I give a different answer. I went from no way on the planet in March and April when we were first really hiding under our tables, ducking and covering like the old nuclear test drills, to the May when I felt like, yeah, we got this. We're going to be fine. And then June was sort of depending on which side of the bed I woke up on. And now I'm starting to get more doubt than optimism. And it hurts. It hurts a lot because then it affects our family, and just from a totally personal point of view, in addition to all the other people it's going to affect. And there's countless thousands, people I know and people I don't know, in the industry, out of the industry, the universities. You see Stanford, which has an endowment that would fill up the state of Texas, and they dropped 11 sports. Now, first off, who knew that they had 38 other than them? But you don't draw any joy in that. And yes, they can stay and get a Stanford education, which is worth untold amount of money with the connections and the prestige of that university. But still, these are people who went to Stanford not just for the education, but to participate in their sports, which will be reduced to a club level. Now, they may stay on and do that, and honest to God, if you're thinking about your future and you're a synchronized swimmer, I'm staying at Stanford. Okay? That degree breaks down doors. It doesn't open them. It flattens them with a bulldozer. So I stick with it. But it hurts. It stinks. It positively stinks. So here we are once again, and I said to myself, there's two things that I didn't want to talk about when I started doing this show. I don't want to get into politics because that's a no-win situation. And I really don't want to spend every darn show virus, virus, virus. And every darn show has been virus, virus, virus. So I wish I could avoid it, but it is where we are right now with this thing, and there's nothing that we can do about it. And here's the other thing. Yes, the financial damage for the universities, for the networks, if we lose college football, if somehow the NFL doesn't happen, then you might be looking at a nuclear winter in the broadcast industry. For the networks, Fox and CBS and ESPN, of course, who carries a hefty price tag for one game a week, it could be a disaster because of lost ad revenue. And, I know people have complained over the years about the number of commercials and how football games, particularly football games, seem to take longer than ever. I mean, I've been at games that have been 4 hours. Part of that is commercial time built in. Part of that is situations where you go a long stretch without a break, and then the producer has to shove in, she or he has to shove in a couple of breaks extra. And yes, it elongates the game, but that's how those games get on the air. You guys know that. So the lost ad revenue, if there is no NFL, will be devastating. Already, if you look at the way the networks are, nobody's producing any new shows, right? It's funny. I see, oh, so and so has got a new show coming up on NBC. Well, when? When are these companies going to start being able to safely produce shows? So you might want to not binge your Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime shows. You might want to start spacing those out a little bit, because it's going to take a while in some cases to get your favorite shows back. And if we have no new television shows to look at and no televised sports, then that part of the entertainment industry is going to take a sock like it's never taken before. We knew following 9/11 what an economic hit we took, which was massive. Look at the airline industry then, and now look at the airline industry and what's happening there. I mean, this is really a disaster in every way, shape, or form. So, keep your fingers crossed that somehow we can get this thing roped and tossed in the barn somehow to where people can play somewhat safely. You're not going to have 100% safety. That's naive. And as I mentioned on the last show, if you want to jump up and down every time there's an athlete who tests positive, then you're going to need a really good pair of shoes, because they're going to do it. If it's too many, or I think the thing that's really going to break the whole thing down is if somebody gets very seriously ill. Now, to our knowledge, that hasn't happened yet. But if, let's say, a major league ball player needs an extended hospitalization, or is intubated, or is in ICU, or where you've read about, and I don't know about you, but I've read a lot of horror stories about that, then we've got a real problem on our hands. But one sport that is back? Soccer! Oh, God, there go the viewers. Stick around. I'm going to go in a little bit of a weird way with this, because why not? And I wrote it down. Soccer has returned. MLS is back in their bubble, with a couple of teams having dropped out. In fact, I can't go watch the games, but from where I'm located, I'm probably 25 minutes away from where that bubble is, where the NBA is starting the bubble now at Disney. And it was nice to see. I do not have a problem with soccer. I do some part-time soccer broadcasting for the United Soccer League, which is also opening play this weekend, and hopefully will do so safely, so I can do some games later in the season. And they've put regional pods. Actually, they cooked up a really damn smart idea of putting regional pods so it cuts the travel down. But I have no trouble with soccer. I understand some of you do. I understand some of you don't see the beauty in a 0-0 game on the pitch. You know what? I don't either. And I've announced them. And I've seen a couple that were exciting. I get it. Not enough scoring. You don't know the players. They overact when they get hurt. These are all fair. And I also will quickly admit, even as somebody who does soccer broadcasts every year, and did a season of the last season of the last incarnation of the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, I understand the criticisms, but I still enjoy the game. When it's played well, it's crisp, it's exciting. The thrusts mean something. I know, phrasing. My favorite team, the U.S. Women's National Team. My least favorite team, the U.S. Men's National Team. And like you, I love a winner, and that's why my teams are like that. But what this leads me to, and where I'm going with this, is something you couldn't anticipate. But I was thinking about this the other day when I started thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, and the return of MLS, because now where I live in South Florida, we have Inter Miami CF, which a lot of people are excited about, and where they will be playing eventually is they have a new stadium built on the grounds of Lockhart Stadium and Fort Lauderdale Baseball Stadium. Now, if you are a South Florida native, you were probably there for something at one point or another. Maybe the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, maybe a high school football game, maybe Florida Atlantic football before they got their beautiful stadium on campus. And Fort Lauderdale Baseball Stadium for decades had the New York Yankees training. And then the Baltimore Orioles moved in and closed out the stadium a few years ago. I was actually the PA announcer for the Orioles in the spring for about 8 years in the early 2000s. Loved it. Loved it. Fun job. Easy work. Fun. Didn't pay a lot, guys. Come on. But anyway, those places are gone. And you know what? They needed to be. And this is where I'm going with this, because this is going to make a few people mad, I think. Some of these old nostalgic stadiums, and Lockhart was one of them, they needed to go. You know another one that needed to go? The Orange Bowl. By the time the University of Miami finished their days at the Orange Bowl, if you remember correctly, after Hurricane Wilma, 2005, I believe it was, part of that stadium was condemned because of the hurricane. It was literally ruled some parts of the Orange Bowl were not safe to sit in. Well, they didn't want to pour a lot of money to fix the place up. Now, if we're going to avoid the politics of all of this, unless I want to bring Billy Corbin in as a guest one day, but I understand they spent a boatload of money to give the Marlins a sweetheart deal and build their stadium on the same ground as the Orange Bowl. It's actually not a bad stadium, especially when they open it up and you can see the city. I kind of like it. When they close the roof, then it just becomes a generic baseball stadium. But opened up, it's nice. I understand what the Orange Bowl meant to the University of Miami and to the Miami Dolphins. I understand things have changed. You don't have that one end zone where you would run, you'd be right by the end zone, and 10 feet later, there's that net, and there's people down there just screaming and yelling at you and raising all sorts of hell. That was a fun place. It was a fun time. I went to a lot of games there. I sat in the stands as a reporter. I sat in the press box. I stood on the field during some incredible moments, or on the sidelines during some incredible moments. This is a true story. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the footage of Kellen Winslow being helped off the field by his two teammates in that San Diego-Miami game. If I had only been a bit more of a camera hog, I could have been in that shot, maybe in the background, because they walked maybe 5 feet away from me, because I had to cover the San Diego locker room that night. So I get the appeal of nostalgia. I'll tell you something else about me and nostalgia, and this is, again, 100% true. You know how I fall asleep at night after a good half-hour cry? I go to YouTube, and I find the This Week in Pro Football or This Week in the NFL shows from the late 60s and early to mid-70s with Pat Summerall and Tom Brookshire, or maybe narrated by the late, great Jack Whitaker or Chuck Thompson or many other, Harry Callis, all men who have left us, unfortunately. And I watch those as I fall asleep. That's how I fall asleep. 100% true. And Marriott hotels, bless their hearts, now have internet TV with YouTube, and you can just fire it up there, set the sleep timer, set it, and forget it. I don't know if you hear, but there's construction going on behind me here. There's a whole new area of suburbs coming in where I'm at, so I hope the truck noise isn't bothering you, but it's not like I can run out there and tell them to stop. So I completely appreciate the feel of nostalgia in sports, in life, in movies, get it all. I'm not watching the HBO Perry Mason because I like the old black and white Perry Mason. I don't need a dark, dour Perry Mason as played by Matthew Reese. I understand the show's pretty good. It's a hit. I get it. Not going to watch. I prefer my Perry Mason. So nostalgia is pretty cool, but there's a practicality that has to come with that. And the Orange Bowl had to go. Lockhart Stadium had to go. Was it a great place to watch soccer? Damn right it was. In the 70s, when I was the spotter for the PA announcer and also a radio reporter, in the late 70s, when the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, the first team that I ever fell in love with in South Florida, were rolling, I would tell you that when the New York Cosmos came with Pele and Quinaglia and Beckenbauer, that was the best soccer match in the world that night. I don't care where you tell me. You can tell me England, you can tell me Serie A in Italy. Anywhere in the world, the best match was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when the Strikers played the Cosmos. You could drink with the players after the game. Since the drinking age was 18 back then, you're damn right I did. I had a beer with George Best once. Then I found out years later that I'm about one of a million people who have said that, and unfortunately, George was a raging alcoholic, and it ended up killing him. So there's kind of a sad twist to that. But at the time, come on, man. I'm Superman. I had a beer with George Best, one of the greatest players of all time. Look into his career, and you'll see what I mean. But sometimes your heart and your head, which often fight, your head has to win sometimes. And in the case of getting rid of Lockhart Stadium, and God, if you ever saw some of the pictures, my friend Bruce Silverman, who had also been a Strikers broadcaster and is now with Orlando City doing their radio and does a lot of other things, took photos of what Lockhart looked like before it got wiped out. And you had weeds that were like this. You could have lost a small animal on that field. It was awful. It was sad. Fort Lauderdale Stadium got to be so run down. In fact, even when the Orioles were training there, and I guess I can say this now, half of their weight room was outdoors. They would bring the weight room stuff down for spring training for 6 weeks. And because the locker room area was not big enough, it could only hold the players, you'd see tents and weights outdoors. Well, I have that in my backyard right now, a rusted out weight set, which the boys were using to train because the gyms are closed. So nostalgia can only get you so far. And that's where those places had to go. Lockhart had to go. I haven't been in the new stadium. I have driven by it. It looks beautiful. And I'm looking for an opportunity. I was actually going to be broadcasting one of those games in April. Inter Miami CF game. They have an app that they have their broadcast on, although I do believe eventually they will be on regular television as well at times. And I know the other game was on ESPN. I was pumped, excited. And it just didn't work out, as you know, because of the virus. But much as I dig nostalgia, you just can't let it ruin something that's new and modern. Great concert venues. Nostalgia. Do you have 5 hours to talk about the Hollywood Sportatorium? Because I could go till about 4 o'clock talking about the Sportatorium. And if you don't know what that is, and I'm sure a lot of you who aren't from South Florida know what I'm talking about, it was an old barn airplane hangar of a concert venue that's all South Florida had in the 70s. And everybody who mattered came in there, from Elvis to Zeppelin to U2 to Billy Joel, Santana. I mean, on and on and on. Van Halen, the young Van Halen, the DLR Van Halen, all of that. And I went to a lot of those shows. ZZ Top show with the cattle, all of that. It was a barn. The bathroom stalls didn't have doors. Uncomfortable? Yeah. Plastic seats? Yeah. One way in, one way out, like the Allman Brothers song. There's only one way out. 2-lane road, that's it. I don't even know what's there now. Knowing South Florida, probably a strip mall. The place had to go. We have great concert venues now. Big arenas for hockey, for basketball, for concerts. Big stuff, big time. But there's always going to be that nostalgia for what you grew up on. Always. I have it for the Sporto. Of course I do. I left the Rush concert that was 3 hours late. When people started throwing bottles, I got the hell out of there. I never did see Rush on that tour in the 70s. I don't even remember why they were late. Those guys weren't big druggies, so I don't think it was anything like that. But they were just late. Great venue. But you got to move on. You can't just live off of that. And last note here, and it's kind of a nostalgic note as well. And this ended up being the nostalgia tour because what am I going to talk about? Baseball? Basketball? Nah, not right now. This is something I neglected to do Tuesday. And again, I was really shook that the camera froze and everything just went to heck. And I felt awful about that. I didn't even put that show on YouTube, but I'll put this one on. I felt terrible. A week ago, unfortunately, South Florida Radio lost George Rodriguez at 55 years old to what I understand was a heart attack. And if you don't know the name, and a few of you, probably a lot of you don't, George was the last producer for the legendary talk show host Neil Rogers, who I could talk till 5 o'clock about. Neil was an utterly brilliant and very popular talk show host in South Florida and probably wasn't always the easiest guy to work with. And I know a little bit of that firsthand myself because when I was a kid, and I do mean a kid, I hadn't even graduated college yet, I was announcing baseball games with Neil, University of Miami games for a season and a half. Yeah, a long time ago. And Neil was fabulous at that, by the way. He could have gone on if he'd wanted to. Anyway, George did a magnificent job producing. And Neil didn't do guests in those days. He started out as a traditional, and this is not a sports talk show. He started out as a traditional talk show host, topics. I mean, old enough to where I can remember things like, and if you're Anita Bryant speaking out against homosexuality, English only in South Florida. That was a big thing. No casinos in South Florida. That was going on in the late 70s, early 80s before we finally grew up and got casinos. So that was Neil's career. He was unbelievably brilliant. But George was his final producer. He was a contributor. He was on the air as a foil for Neil. He understood Neil. And as Neil's career winded down, George did a magnificent job, I think, working with him and getting the most out of Neil, who split his time between South Florida and Toronto. And then finally Neil retired, and unfortunately a few years ago passed on. He had some health issues. And George kind of became the caretaker of a lot of things Neil, and started SouthFloridaRadio.com. And just by all accounts from everybody who's ever worked with him, and I read a lot of posts over the weekend, was a wonderful guy. Our paths never crossed. By the time Neil was working with George, I was at a different radio company altogether. I had bounced around the dial as Neil had. Neil and I were in the same building a couple of times, but not when George was around. And then they went one way, and I was in another, and that's how it went. But by all accounts, George was respected, loved, and very well regarded in the South Florida radio community. So I didn't want much more than a week to go by without noting his passing and sending my love and sympathy to his family and to his friends. Well, nothing blew up. I noticed the video didn't freeze, and I really appreciate you all watching. Again, I'll be back with another Nooner with Dave LaMont live on Monday back home. So it won't be probably quite as pretty as this. I'm still looking for a good location with good lighting in my house. And I certainly don't want to sit too far outside with our humidity in the 90s and the always strong chance of powerful thunderstorms, which wiped out something I had planned this morning. But I do want to thank you all. Please guide you. And there goes my dog. The perfect way to end the program, because another dog in the neighborhood is going, and she's going off. So it is time for me to go before you start to hate my dog, and you really shouldn't. So thanks again. This show will be on YouTube later on. I'm Dave LaMont. You've had another Nooner with Dave LaMont, and I very much appreciate all your support. And I will see you again on Monday at 12 Eastern. Thanks. Bye.